Say that again, little girl. 9 languages? Don't make me laugh. Victor Harlow's voice cracked through the air like a whip, his sharp laughter bouncing against the glass walls of his 52nd floor office. The sound carried a kind of cruelty polished by years of power, meant not just to mock, but to cut. Outside, Manhattan shimmered like a river of stars. Inside, the room was a fortress of marble and steel. Every surface gleamed with wealth, paintings worth more than houses, rugs so thick they swallowed footsteps whole, a desk carved from stone as if permanence itself could be bought. Amara Williams stood small beside her mother's cleaning cart, a worn school backpack clinging to her shoulder. She was 12, thin, her sneakers scrubbed to shine, though their soles had nearly worn through. She had spoken a truth only seconds earlier. I speak 9 languages. Yet in this space, truth had been twisted instantly into a joke. Eleanor Williams, her mother, lowered her eyes. 10 years of working nights in this tower had taught her to shrink, to exist only as a shadow moving silently across polished floors. To survive meant to be invisible. Tonight, though, her daughter's words refused invisibility. They hung in the air, unyielding, demanding to be heard. Victor adjusted his cuff, tilting his wrist so that the face of a gold watch caught the light, gleaming like a reminder of the gulf between him and them. His laugh rang out again, hollow, metallic, echoing the certainty of a man used to standing above others. The silence that followed was heavier than the laughter itself. Even the hum of the air conditioning seemed to hesitate, as though waiting for what would come next. Amara's chest rose and fell quickly, her pulse loud in her own ears. But her chin did not lower. Her eyes did not falter. She wasn't angry, wasn't pleading. She simply stood there, steady in a way that unsettled him far more than any outburst could. For a flicker of a moment, the rules of the room felt reversed. The billionaire, with all his marble and glass, was the one scrambling for footing, while the girl beside a supply cart stood unshaken. And it was there, in the glare of city lights, in the sharp echo of a laugh that failed to wound, that their story truly began. To see why Amara's words carried such weight, we have to step into the world that shaped her. For 10 years, Eleanor Williams had worked inside this tower of steel and glass, yet never once had she been allowed to belong to it. Every evening she arrived in her navy blue uniform, pushing a cart of supplies that rattled softly down hallways designed to mute the sound of workers' footsteps. The scent of polish, the hum of elevators, the distant chatter of executives behind closed doors, all of it reminded her daily that this place was not hers. Her daughter, though, had grown up walking those corridors with wide eyes. Amara noticed things her mother tried to ignore. How people spoke without saying Eleanor's name, how they passed her as if she were part of the furniture. She had seen her mother swallow humiliation so many times that silence itself became a kind of shield. The 52nd floor, that shield was tested often. Victor Harlow, the man who owned more buildings than most families own chairs, had built an empire on efficiency and arrogance. To him, staff were not people, but tools, replaceable, nameless. And when Elena crossed his path, he treated her with the same casual dismissal he gave to the wastebasket by his desk. That night, when he sneered at her daughter's claim, it wasn't the first insult, only the loudest. 10 years here, and still only pushing a cart, he had said earlier, his tone clipped. That must be the limit of your ambition. Elena had lowered her head then, her voice small. I finished high school. His laugh had cut through her like glass. But Amara was different. She had grown up in the shadows of this tower, but she refused to shrink into them. Her backpack, though worn, held notebooks full of words in scripts from around the world. Spanish verbs scribbled on one page, Mandarin characters traced carefully on another, French phrases taped to the edges. Every scrap of language she gathered came not from wealth, but from people who, like her mother, carried knowledge that society had overlooked. There was Mr. Ahmed, who once taught literature in Damascus, but now drove a taxi, giving Arabic lessons at the public library on Thursdays. Mrs. Wang, who had chaired a department in Beijing before moving here, now teaching Mandarin in a cramped community room. And Miss Rossi, who cleaned houses by day and offered Italian classes at night. These were Amara's teachers, her allies, though none of them stood in that office now. Victor didn't know it yet, but the girl in front of him had spent years quietly building a fortress of her own, not of marble and glass, but of words, memory, and resilience. The office seemed to vibrate under the weight of what had just been said. Elena's instinct was to bow her head further, to shield her daughter from the scorn she knew was coming. But Amara did not bow. She met Victor's gaze, steady as the city lights beyond the glass. And in that charged silence, something shifted. It was as though two worlds had collided, the world of unchecked wealth and the world of unrecognized dignity. Collisions spark, and this one lit quickly. Victor Harlow's laughter, sharp and echoing, turned to words meant to pierce deeper. 9 languages, he said, circling them like a predator who'd scented weakness. Do you think that makes you exceptional? Even if it were true, which I doubt, what good does it do? Knowledge without power is useless. You'll end up just like your mother, scrubbing away the dust of people smarter than you. Elena's grip tightened on the handle of the cart. For years, she had endured remarks like these, quiet cuts delivered in polished tones. She wanted to shield her daughter from the sting of it. But when she opened her mouth to whisper, "Don't answer him," Amara's calm voice rose instead. "You say translators gave up on that manuscript," Amara said softly, nodding to the stack of yellowed pages on his desk. Victor stopped pacing. His smirk faltered for a fraction of a second before returning. "I don't waste my time on riddles. I have people for that." "Then you can't read it either," Amara replied, her tone still even. "Yet you mock others for not being able to." The air in the room thickened. The secretary outside the glass doors pretended not to listen, but her eyes flicked nervously through the partition. A few employees paused in the corridor, sensing something unusual, a child's voice rising steady against the man who signed their paychecks. Victor leaned closer, his smile sharp. "You're bold, I'll give you that. But boldness from a child in your shoes? It's laughable. You think your words mean anything here? This isn't the place for daydreams. Ambition is for people born to climb these stairs, not for girls like you." Elena's breath caught, her shoulders curling inward as if to shield her daughter from the weight of his words. But Amara didn't flinch. Her eyes stayed locked on Victor's, calm, as if she had expected this exact blow. "Money isn't proof of intelligence," she answered quietly. "Respect is." The silence that followed was heavier than stone. For the first time, Victor's laughter didn't come easily. His jaw tightened, and when he spoke again, his words were edged with irritation rather than amusement. A poor child from a public school claiming to know 9 languages? His voice rose, sharp with disbelief. "Do you expect me to believe that? If it's true, prove it, right here, right now." He slapped his hand down on the brittle manuscript, the pages trembling under the impact. The sound rang out in the office like a gavel, a challenge thrown openly in front of his staff, his empire, his own sense of invulnerability. Elena's heart pounded. She wanted to pull her daughter back, to say no, to protect her from humiliation. But she saw something in Amara's posture, her spine straight, her eyes unwavering, that told her silence was no longer safety. Outside the window, Manhattan glowed with thousands of lights. Inside, the true heat came not from lamps or chandeliers, but from the pressure building in the room. Every mocking word, every test Victor set down, pressed heavier on Amara's shoulders. Yet, with each strike, she only seemed to grow steadier. The challenge hung in the air, heavy as stone. Victor's palms still rested on the manuscript, daring her to fail. Amara did not step back. She lifted her hand, steady, and began to count on her fingers. Spanish, my native language. English, advanced. Mandarin, basic but improving. Arabic, conversational. French, intermediate. Portuguese, fluent. Italian, basic. German, conversational. Russian, basic. Each word landed crisp, each pronunciation clean. The syllables rolled out of her mouth like stones striking marble, precise and undeniable. For a moment, Victor blinked, caught off guard. Then he laughed, louder than before, as though volume alone could hide the crack forming in his certainty. A girl from a public school claiming 9 languages? That sounds like a fairy tale. Where's your proof? Amara didn't flinch. She slipped her backpack off her shoulder, pulling out a small notebook. Its pages were worn, edges frayed, but filled with meticulous handwriting, verbs, characters, alphabets, snippets of dialogue written in different tongues. She held it open for a moment, then closed it again, her voice steady. The New York Public Library offers free classes, she said, not raising her voice, but making sure every word carried. Mr. Ahmed teaches Arabic on Thursdays. He was once a professor of literature in Damascus. Now he drives a taxi. Mrs. Wang teaches Mandarin on Tuesdays. She used to lead a department in Beijing. And Mrs. Rossi, she teaches Italian on weekends. She cleans houses by day, volunteers by night. They are not rich, but they are rich in knowledge. They paused, eyes locked on Victor. They taught me, and I listened. Anyone can learn, if they're given respect and opportunity. Elena felt her grip on the cleaning cart loosen, just slightly. For the first time in years, she saw her daughter's path not as a narrow alley hidden in shadows, but as a road lined with light, paved by persistence, shaped by community. Victor's smirk faltered. He glanced at the manuscript on his desk, then back at the girl. What had begun as an evening of amusement was shifting into something he hadn't planned for, something far more dangerous than rebellion. It was truth, spoken aloud, in a place where truth was usually silenced. The secretary outside leaned closer to the glass, straining to catch every word. A pair of junior executives passing by slowed their steps. The tower that had thrived on silence was listening now. Amara drew a deep breath. Her voice did not rise, but it carried with the weight of someone far older than 12. You say knowledge without power is useless, but knowledge is power. And power doesn't come from mocking others, it comes from lifting them up. For the first time all evening, Victor had no quick reply. His eyes narrowed, jaw tight. He tapped the manuscript again, as if trying to regain control of the game. Then read it, he demanded, if you truly can. The hum of the air conditioning returned, taut as a wire. Elena's heart thudded painfully. She looked at her daughter, at the small hands resting on the brittle pages. And then she saw something she had never seen before. Not a child about to be crushed by the weight of the challenge, but a girl standing taller than the marble and glass around her. Amara laid her palms gently on the brittle manuscript. The pages were yellowed, ink faded, but the words seemed to rise as if waiting for her voice. She began in classical Chinese, her tones sharp, deliberate, flowing like brushstrokes across silk. Then Arabic, melodic, curved, weaving like patterns in a carpet. Sanskrit followed, heavy with ancient cadence. Next came Hebrew, then Persian, then Latin, each tongue distinct yet connected, as though a river had passed through many lands but never lost its water. The room stilled. Even the secretary who had been leaning on the glass door forgot to breathe. Executives who had lingered in the hall now stood openly, watching, stunned. This wasn't a performance, it was revelation. Victor's jaw slackened. For once, his voice failed him.
In the tower where money and power had always spoken the loudest, it was a 12-year-old's voice that carried. Amara lifted her eyes from the page. "Shall I tell you what it means?" Victor's throat tightened. He nodded, not from pride, but from a place he had not touched in years: uncertainty. "The manuscript speaks of wisdom and wealth," she said, steady, clear. "It says, true wisdom is not found in palaces, but in humble hearts. True wealth is not measured in coins, but in the dignity you see in others. And true power doesn't humiliate, it lifts." Her words landed like stones on marble. Each one echoed longer than the last. Victor wanted to argue, to dismiss it as coincidence, but the certainty in her tone stripped away his defenses. For a moment, all his suits, his gold watches, his towers felt weightless, just trinkets stacked against a truth too heavy to ignore. His voice cracked, low. "I am sorry."
The words stunned the office. In 10 years, Elena Williams had never once heard anyone on this floor apologize to her. Her hand trembled against the cleaning cart. Tears filled her eyes, but she did not lower her head this time. Amara, however, remained steady. "Words are not enough," she said quietly. "If you mean them, then prove it. 3 things." Victor blinked, caught between disbelief and surrender. 3 things? "1," Amara said, holding up a finger. "You apologize to my mother, not just for tonight, but for 10 years of treating her as if she were invisible. Say her full name. Look her in the eye when you do." Victor turned slowly. His voice faltered at first, then steadied. "Elena Williams," he said, his tone stripped of arrogance. "I am sorry for not seeing you. I am sorry for speaking to you without respect. I am sorry for forgetting your humanity." His words cracked at humanity, but he did not look away. Elena's shoulders straightened. For the first time in years, she felt visible. 2, Amara continued, lifting another finger. "You use your power differently. Scholarships for students from families like mine, funding for free language classes at the library, career paths for workers here, so hidden talent can step into the light." Victor swallowed. "How many scholarships?" "Enough to matter," Amara answered firmly. "At least 150. Not a number for publicity, but enough to bind you to responsibility." The executives outside gasped softly. This was no child's fantasy. It was a negotiation, as precise as any boardroom contract. "And 3, Amara raised her final finger. "You learn a language yourself, from the beginning. Sit at the wooden tables of the library. No VIP rooms, no special chairs. Every Tuesday after work, you will come. I will teach you Mandarin." For a moment, silence. Then Victor gave a faint laugh, not mocking this time, but tinged with something close to humility. "Mandarin, from you?" He nodded slowly. "Agreed." The room seemed to shift. Power had passed from marble desk to wooden table, from the billionaire's hands to the girl who held nothing but knowledge. Victor exhaled, his voice almost fragile. "And the manuscript? Does it say anything more?" Amara placed her hand on the final page. "Yes, it says, the richest person is the one who enriches others. The strongest is the one who helps the weak to stand. And the wisest is the one who remembers he was once blind." Elena's tears spilled freely, not from shame, but release. The weight of years seemed to lift as though carried by someone else at last. The secretary at the door wiped her own eyes. The executives standing in the hall no longer looked at Amara as just a janitor's daughter. They looked at her as a teacher. Victor lowered his head. "Then let me learn." The air in the 52nd floor office had shifted. Where marble and glass once pressed like a weight, there was now something lighter, almost fragile, possibility. Victor Harlow had agreed. His apology had been spoken, his conditions accepted. But words, as Amara had said, were only the beginning.
The following week, the first cracks in the tower's old order became visible. A memo circulated, not revenue charts or expansion plans, but a new scholarship program carrying Elena Williams's name. 150 full awards for students from working families. At the bottom of the page was Victor's signature, bold but unadorned, followed by a line he had written himself: "Not charity, correction."
In the library across town, Tuesday nights gained a new student. Victor arrived without his entourage, a plain notebook tucked under his arm. He sat at the same wooden tables where Amara waited, her backpack filled with lesson plans. There were no glass walls, no private assistants, only a child correcting the tones of a man who once thought himself untouchable. "Ma, Victor repeated, stumbling over the four sounds. His voice caught, clumsy, before settling into the right pitch. Amara smiled faintly. Better. Again. Around them, the library hummed. An elderly woman taught her grandson math at the next table. A group of students bent over homework. A taxi driver studied for his citizenship test. Here, mistakes weren't a mark of shame, they were steps on a ladder. For Elena, the changes were just as real. Her name, once unspoken in the tower, now appeared on meeting agendas. She had been asked to lead a new initiative, creating career pathways for service staff. For the first time, she entered the executive floor not with a cleaning cart, but with a notebook, her posture upright. Some employees whispered at first, uncertain, but Elena's calm authority silenced them quicker than any reprimand could. The scholarship applications poured in, children of mechanics, waitresses, nurses, janitors. Essays filled with dreams that had once seemed out of reach. Amara helped review them alongside librarians and community teachers. Each application was read blind, no names, no addresses, only effort and determination. At the launch ceremony, the stage was modest. No flashing screens, no corporate slogans, just a row of plain chairs, a wooden lectern, and a black curtain. Victor stood at the back, quietly. It was Amara who stepped forward to address the crowd. "Equality is giving everyone shoes," she said. "Equity is making sure they fit. This scholarship measures the foot first, then provides the shoes, not for appearance, but for the road ahead." The applause was not thunderous, but it was steady, like rain falling on parched ground. Parents wept quietly. Students clutched their envelopes as if they held new worlds inside. Victor watched, realizing that for the first time in his career, the measure of success was not profit margins, but faces, hopeful, determined, unafraid. In the weeks that followed, resistance surfaced. A finance column mocked the company for going soft. Old acquaintances at Victor's private club scoffed, asking if he had lost his edge. He no longer laughed with them. Instead, he left the table. His place was elsewhere now. At the library, at community meetings, at round tables where titles didn't matter. For Amara, life returned to its rhythms: school, homework, evenings at the library. Yet something fundamental had shifted. When she walked into the tower beside her mother, people no longer looked through her. They looked at her. Not because she was extraordinary, but because she had proven what ordinary courage could do. One evening, as she packed her notebook after class, Victor approached her quietly. "Do you think people can really change?" he asked. Amara looked at him, her expression thoughtful. "Change isn't a word," she said. "It's a practice. You've started. Now you keep going." He nodded, almost as if taking notes from her. And so the aftermath of one confrontation rippled outward, not only through marble hallways and library tables, but through lives. Students who would one day stand taller because of scholarships. Workers whose names would finally be spoken in meetings. A billionaire who had traded mockery for humility. The tower remained. The city lights still shone, but their gravity had shifted forever. In the weeks that followed, the tower no longer felt the same. The marble walls still stood, the chandeliers still glowed, but something invisible had shifted. What once carried only the weight of money now carried the echo of words spoken by a 12-year-old girl. On the 50th floor lobby wall hung a framed copy of the scholarship poster. At its bottom, Amara had written 3 lines in her neat handwriting. Say people's names. Listen with respect. Lift others so they can rise too. It wasn't art, not even calligraphy, just pencil marks on paper. But employees stopped to read it, day after day. For some, it became a reminder before walking into a meeting. For others, it was a mirror they could no longer ignore. At the library, Table 12 became a quiet landmark. Students came and went, pages turned, pens scratched across notebooks. Sometimes Amara sat there correcting Victor's tones. Sometimes Elena joined her, reviewing proposals for staff advancement. And sometimes strangers simply passed by, not knowing the history of that wooden table, but sensing somehow that it had witnessed a change worth remembering. For Amara, the manuscript remained her symbol. The ancient words she once read under pressure were more than languages stitched together. They were a mirror held up to society itself. Whenever she touched those pages again, she didn't think only of Victor's defeat. She thought of her mother's shoulders straightening, of teachers who had given their evenings freely, of the moment when dignity had spoken louder than wealth. Victor, too, carried his own reminder. In his leather-bound notebook, between figures and contracts, he had scribbled a simple phrase in Mandarin characters, awkward, uneven strokes corrected by Amara's hand. Ren, person. It was his practice, his scar, his way of remembering that leadership was measured not in assets, but in how many lives could stand taller because of him. And for Elena, the symbol was her own name, spoken aloud, written on memos, acknowledged after a decade of silence. To her, it was proof that invisibility could be undone, that even the quietest endurance could bloom into recognition when someone dared to speak. Stories like these never end with applause. They linger in habits, in practices, in the way people choose to see one another. The true legacy of that night was not only a billionaire's apology or a child's brilliance. It was the seed of a culture where dignity was not an exception, but a rule. As Amara once said, wealth is not measured in dollars, wisdom is not measured in titles, and power is not measured in how high you stand, but in how many you lift when you rise. Every now and then, a story reminds us that dignity cannot be bought, and wisdom cannot be silenced. What we saw in Amara's journey was not only the triumph of a young girl over arrogance, but the timeless truth that respect is the foundation of real power. A billionaire's wealth, no matter how high the glass tower, will always ring hollow if it stands on the backs of those made invisible. Yet one steady voice, even from a child, can pierce that silence and turn the tables of power upside down.
This lesson is not bound to an office in Manhattan. It is a mirror for all of us. How often do we let prejudice or habit blind us to the gifts of others? How often do we walk past people without learning their names, without seeing the full worth they carry? In American culture, there is a saying, "Don't judge a book by its cover." But in life, too often, we forget to even open the book. Amara's courage teaches us that change begins when someone dares to speak, when someone refuses to shrink, and when someone insists that respect belongs to every human being. For viewers, especially those who have carried years of quiet endurance, this is a gentle reminder. Silence may feel safe, but it also keeps injustice alive. Speaking up, with calm, with clarity, with truth, can open doors not only for ourselves, but for generations after us. Whether it is at work, in family, or in society, the first step is to believe that your voice matters, because it does. Now, I'd love to hear from you. What part of this story stayed with you most? Have you ever witnessed or lived a moment where dignity changed the outcome? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If this story touched your heart, please give it a like, share it with friends who might need the encouragement, and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss more powerful and thought-provoking stories like this.
May you carry with you a sense of peace and quiet strength tonight, knowing that even after the storms of injustice, hope still rises and respect always has the power to heal.